You're on.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to the 2017 Unity and Hope Conference. If everybody can have their seats, we're going to get started right now. So just a couple housekeeping things. If anybody hasn't registered, please see me. We can make sure that you're all signed up. I have an anonymous survey just of what you enjoyed from the weekend, what you feel like was useful, not useful, if anything you feel like wasn't accurate that was shared. We're also trying to compile resources, so everybody's favorite books, websites, anything that you think is helpful to share with the rest of the community. We're going to compile all that together and email it out to everybody after. We have ribbons in the back of the room, little TI ribbons. We also have shirts from Terry Brewer's website that we're selling at cost. And there's the agendas and a sample of like a flyer to hand out as well that can also be found on Terry Brewer's website too. So to get started, Dr. Aaron's going to kick us off. He has a master's in environmental toxicology, a PhD in neurobiology. He was targeted from 2013 to 2016 and is now a strong activist and advocate in the community. So I'll give you Dr. Aaron.
Thank you. Hey, let's have a big round of applause for Allison for this heroic effort. I feel honored to be here at what I think could be a historic first of something that grows into a regular event. I think we all know we have our work cut out for us to get to our goal of exposing these crimes that are happening, and that's going to take consistent, determined effort. So what we need to show is that we can come through on that. So I'd like, as soon as this conference is over, for the community to start discussing planning for next year's second annual conference, perhaps on the West Coast. But thanks again, Allison. We really appreciate this opportunity. So I have something that's not on the agenda. I would like, since this is a historic event, at 12:45, near the end of the lunch break, I would like to do a group photo on the hill where there's the tower over there. So 12:45, please join for a group photo.
One more important announcement.
Yes.
One more important announcement that I forgot. Per Kurt Wiebe, we have an extension on our symptoms survey. So if anybody has not participated in the symptoms survey with the help of NSA whistleblowers Bill Binney and Kurt Wiebe, please see me at the break and we will get the information in to get that survey in today. So sorry, I wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. So I prepared a talk that is longer than half an hour, but I'm gonna limit it to half an hour. And after the conference is over, I'm going to post a video of my full presentation. And one of the strategies that I take personally in this activism effort is I always think about talking to the general public, talking to non-victims. How can we do that most effectively? And I think many of you know that I take kind of a restrained, middle-of-the-road approach to this issue. And that is not to say that I don't think there's some really wild technology and perhaps high-level government involvement in what's going on, but I take the middle approach because I think that's most effective at reaching the general public. And this presentation, I actually did not have this audience in mind as much as I had the general public in mind. But I want to highlight a few things, since this room is essentially full of experts on this issue. How do you become an expert on this issue? By being targeted. By being targeted, you know more than a non-target can possibly know. In the future, if we're ever going to really get the public to understand this issue, as I was talking with Dr. Andrews earlier, we probably are going to need to have experiential training camps for non-victims to really experience what targeting is like. Because it is something that really cannot be conveyed very well by explanation. That's kind of a fanciful idea. But before I get too far, I know that we have family members of victims here who are not targeted, and we have other guests who are not targeted. And I would like to thank you so much for coming. That shows a degree of willingness to take this issue on and consider it. And that's a big step. It's a very lonely crime that we're going through. It's lonely both for the victim and for the loved ones of the victim, because it's hard for them to understand. So we really appreciate non-victims coming. That's very meaningful, and I would like to ask the community to be very understanding in how long it takes for non-victims to understand this issue. They may never have full understanding. It's a long process. We need to be patient. We need to be understanding that understanding from the outside is slow. I mean, we all can remember before we were targeted how impossible it would have been to fully understand the issue. So anyway, I will take you through some highlights of my presentation, and later I will put this online. And keep in mind that my presentation is aimed at the general public who doesn't know about this issue. Okay, the full presentation was going to come in 4 parts. I was going to give a background on, or I am when I do the presentation online, a background on the technology and the crimes, and then I was going to go into sort of a scientist's take on the bioeffects of radio frequency weapons and devices. This is an area where I can speak with some authority because I have a PhD in neurobiology, and I do take, again, the measured scientific approach. I call it the bottom-up approach, which I think is effective. It will be effective for reaching the public. It will also be effective in legal sense. The bottom-up approach is one where you only work from public domain knowledge. And by working from published papers, you can actually make a case that what we are experiencing is remarkably consistent with published effects of radio frequency energy. And that's actually the only, I'm just going to go through mostly just that part of the talk here, due to time. When do I need to end this, this talk?
You have almost an hour, 50 minutes.
Okay. Maybe if there's time, I'll go into the costs of this, what I call socio-criminal phenomenon. I use that term because it's a crime, but it also has all these social ramifications, and it raises the question, why are these criminals behaving like this? It's mind-blowing that people would engage in this behavior. And then I have a few thoughts on the road ahead, what we're trying to get to. Exposure is what we're really trying to get to first. Justice will come after exposure. Okay, so I'm thinking, I'll see how it goes in terms of time. Okay, so a background on the crimes and technology. Now remember, most of you in this room know this information very well, so I'm trying to reach the people who are in this room who don't know much about this issue. That's the more important audience, in my opinion. Okay, there's some key terms you need to know about this issue. Targeted individual. What is a targeted individual? Well, to me, the essence of being a targeted individual is to be singled out for covert persecution, assault, even torture. But covertness is the key essence of of what a targeted individual experiences. Covert harassment. So you might ask yourself, how can someone be harassed covertly? Harassment should be pretty obvious. Well, the answer lies in the methods that are used, and that is, the primary methods are organized stalking and electronic harassment. The focus of this talk is electronic harassment, but I will just say briefly that organized stalking is a method used by a group of people who conspire to make things really hard on their target. And they used harassment techniques that are very difficult for the audience of bystanders to observe. But because they're repeated over and over again in a stereotyped way, the person on the receiving end of these harassment methods, it's obvious to them because you can't explain people doing intimidating gestures to you the same way over and over again. That doesn't happen by random chance. But to the audience of bystanders, they're essentially invisible crimes. The second method that's used for covert harassment is called electronic harassment. And I'm going to basically explain that over the rest of my talk. And two additional terms that you need to know to understand electronic harassment are directed energy weapons and through-the-wall surveillance, which I will show you briefly right now. So directed energy weapons are devices that fire focused beams or cones of energy in order to harm, disable, or destroy a target. And these are, here on the top, these are military examples of directed energy weapons. Here is a solid-state laser mounted on an Apache helicopter. This figure shows probably the most famous directed energy weapon, which is the active denial system. In this case, it's mounted in an AC-130 gunship. So they have flying versions of these pain ray devices. And what's been happening is that there's basically been a movement of directed energy technologies and the desire to use these technologies from the military arena into the arena of law enforcement and domestic security. So directed energy weapons, the energy can come in the form of higher frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, radio frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, and sound. You could also make ionizing radiation directed energy weapons, but those have been made by criminals, but they're not really common in quote unquote legitimate applications. Okay, so many of you have heard about the events in Cuba. Just if you don't know about this, diplomats in Canada, Canadian diplomats and American diplomats were attacked by quote-unquote sonic weapons. And this happened in hotels in Havana and probably other locations. We don't have all the details. And it resulted in hearing loss and traumatic brain injuries. Now, many people in the targeted individual community believe that calling these sonic attacks might be a red herring or a smokescreen for a more likely cause of this kind of harassment. The effects that were reported in the news and the experiences of the victims are very similar to what many of us have experienced. And it's possible that these were, the devices used in these cases were similar to the harassment devices used on targeted individuals, which seem to be most likely radio frequency devices. Now, why would I say that these are most likely radio frequency devices? Well, if you consider the following, there's a pretty good case for radio frequency devices being the most common. Okay, many TIs report that when they are attacked, the energy seems to penetrate solid barriers before it gets to them. So people get attacked in their own house. The energy comes through the walls or the floor or the ceiling before they are being harmed on the other side of the barrier. Actually, the energy is traveling at the speed of light, so you really can't say. It's hard to say before and after. It's almost like an instantaneous event. But the events are happening when the targets are behind barriers. So you have to think, what kind of energy can pass through barriers? Well, low frequency electromagnetic energy, like that used in ground penetrating radar, has a great ability to pass through barriers. Sonic weapons, ultrasonic weapons have less of an ability to propagate through air, then through a barrier, and then through air before hitting the target. TIs also report noticeable relief from their symptoms when they use RF shielding materials. There's often reports of disrupted electronics. Who here in the room has experienced disrupted electronics during their period of, during the moments of targeting? I think many of us have, yes. Well, disrupted electronics, a likely source of that would be stray, powerful radio frequency signals interfering with your electronics. And some TIs, many actually, make high radio frequency field strength and power density readings that are timed to their attacks. And I don't know if anyone, has anyone made ultrasonic recordings? You can make those with a bat detector. I haven't heard of any TIs who have made an ultrasonic recordings. Anyone? You have? Okay. Ultrasonics are still on the table. Go ahead.
To be fair, I have a device that measured it, but I haven't picked up anything. I have a device that measured ultrasonic.
Oh, right. So that's consistent with what I'm saying. You haven't actually documented ultrasonic recordings. Okay. But I know you have documented RF recordings. Okay. And finally, and what I'd like to talk about is, if you consider the bioeffects of what TIs experience, I do not like to call them symptoms, because symptoms sounds more internally generated, organic. These are coming from outside assaults and intrusions. And the effects of those, taken together, are remarkably consistent with published bioeffects of radio frequency energy. Due to time, can we hold questions until the break? Is that okay? We'll take one more question, and then we'll hold the rest.
I just want to say that I recorded very low frequencies.
Very low frequencies. Low frequencies of radio waves? Or sound?
Sound.
How did you record low frequencies of sound?
With an app called FFT. It's on my FFT plot.
Okay, I'd like to talk to you about that later, but I think that the, okay, one more question, then we're going to hold all the rest of the questions, or we won't end on time. Hold on a second. So I still think that my statement is fair, that RF recordings in the TI community are way more common than sonic recordings, way more common, 100 times more. That would be how I would see it. But I'm not ruling out other forms of assaults. Yes?
Is this going to be online, this presentation?
I'm actually going to put the clean version of this presentation, but both versions will go online.
Great, because I don't have to write it all down.
Right, don't take notes, I will put this online.
Thank you.
Okay, so through-the-wall radar is remarkably common in the modern world. Again, through-the-wall radar there's been some migration, a good degree of migration of this from military arenas into law enforcement arenas and emergency services, and now someone with a fair amount of training in electrical engineering, like these MIT students, can make their own through-the-wall radar devices using the signals that come from standard Wi-Fi signals. And they can get images like this through solid cinder block walls. Okay, now this is thought to be an important enabling technology for electronic harassment, because to assault someone in their own home, you can either bathe the entire home in electromagnetic radiation, which is an inefficient way of targeting. The power density is spread over a wide area, or you can know where they are exactly and hit them with a more precise beam. Similarly, I would say that these criminals who engage in this behavior probably co-opt hacking technologies to hack phone locations, personal communications, and we speculate that there might even be a sinister Pokemon Go-like app for the stalkers to track their targets. These would all be enabling technologies for electronic harassment, but through-the-wall radar is not science fiction at all. This is in wide use by emergency services, and it can be homemade.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Is that related to V2K?
I'm going to talk about V2K in a little bit. Okay, so the other sort of group of enabling technologies would be the harming signals, the things that can produce the harmful harassment or attack signals, as you call them, the attack signals. I like that term. You have the target, you have the tracking signal or the location signal, and the harm signal, basically. And leakage from the military-industrial complex is a likely source, but it's hard for me to comment on that at all because it's a big black box. But we know that there are a lot of more low-tech technologies and devices that could be used for low-tech harassment. If you know where your neighbor is sleeping and you buy one of those microwave links and you place it, if you're in the apartment above them and you place it over where they're sleeping, especially if you can run pulsed signals through there, pulsing them at about, I mean, this is a recipe for harming your neighbor covertly with almost no chance of getting caught. Try 1,000 pulses per second with a pulse width of 100 microseconds. That would probably interrupt the sleep of your neighbor and make them feel pretty sick if you did that to them on a nightly basis. And that would go through the floor, straight into your neighbor's apartment. You can buy electromagnetic pulse generators and high power microwave generators online. They're supposed to be for scientific equipment, but some of them are sold in catalogs that sell essentially an entire toolkit for harassment. Bomb-making manuals, pyrotechnics, stun guns. These are the kinds of vendors where you will find these devices, and they're extremely powerful. I want you to notice the concentric rings at the firing end of this. That will be significant later. That's part of the waveguide, which allows the beam or pulse of microwaves to be directed in a parallel cylindrical beam. You also have generators that are used in the medical industry. They're not designed to be weapons, but I'm pretty sure they could be taken apart and rebuilt into harassment devices. And these kinds of devices can be concealed in many ways. Now, I can't say that I have confirmed evidence, but these are types of concealment that I allege that I experienced in Vancouver. And my evidence for that is feeling the field and seeing how the suspected perpetrator, where that field or beam was originating, was reconfiguring their concealment container as I moved around. That is not definitive proof, okay? So I'll just be clear, that is not definitive proof. But in the Pacific Central Station, as I was trying to flee out of town, I believe a bunch of stalkers converged there, and they had generators hidden in suitcases like that. I mean, it's not going to kill me, but it certainly feels uncomfortable, especially when this goes on for 12 hours no matter where you go in town. In a more comical, again, an alleged concealment method, I encountered one of these, what you might call armored division units of the Vancouver harassment network. Easy to sidestep when she fires what felt like a beam of energy coming from the front. Easy to go around, but then it felt like she nailed me from the back as well. Yeah. The more powerful devices can be hidden in delivery vans, which are very easy to move around in a city covertly. No one will pay attention to that, and you can get harmed extremely badly. This is artwork by David Dees. You can't, it's a little bit cut off, but I really like this image because it captures some events that felt like assaults that were perpetrated this way on me in Vancouver.
Is that a magazine?
No, it's like an activism posting. This has been reposted a lot, and you can find it online. It's called Beam Weapon Digest. It's a great image. I love this image. Now, again, this is an allegation, but this is one that I am confident enough deserves some attention and further investigation as this issue comes to light. In my apartment in Vancouver, I got electronic harassment in many different ways, but there were times when I felt energy coming from the walls of my apartment, and these are pieces of the drywall that I removed from the apartment when I fled Canada. I have these physical samples under UV light. In my apartment, I never used the UV light, but I want to show you that I disabled these sources of energy which were palpable and painful. You could follow them back to the wall. And here I use an artist's knife, and you can see how I did a cut like this. I cut like that, I cut like that, and then I scooped out the drywall. And that disabled that one point of energy. Now, I have multiple examples of this as a confirmation that something is going on. I did not see these orange fluorescent spots until weeks later when I was in safety, and I on a hunch said, let's look at this under black light. And around these spots where I removed something that was redirecting or emitting what felt like hot electric microwave energy, for lack of a better term, I found these rings of fluorescent material. So that's enough for me to say this material needs to be kept. I mean, I ripped these off the wall and then I left Canada. And I would have been put into a psychiatric hospital, so I fled Canada, and because the samples were that valuable to me.
Is that on the inside or the outside, of course?
This is on the side that faces the occupied space of the apartment.
So you don't even have to take it off the wall, you can actually just grab it.
No, well, you might be able to. In the future, I will scan the walls if I ever suspect this might be the case. You can use, if there's time, I have a sample of this with me.
Floor?
Here, I have an actual sample. In fact, I have this piece with me, and we can look at it. But you can use, one of these lights, a PET urine detecting light. But for photography, this does not work very well because it produces a black light that is not that clean. It has some visible light in it, so it swamps out your photographs. You can see it with your eyes this way, but if you want to get really beautiful pictures like this, you want to use a fluorescent tube-style black light. And you need a camera that can deal with light really well. A cell phone camera can't pick this up. I have the camera that's recording this talk right now, right there, which is a $700 camera, has the capabilities to really see these kinds of features. Now, what I also want to mention is, if you find a spot on the surface where you have one of these buildups of fluorescent material, I mean, this is out of this world material. It looks like glittery copper jewels. It's hard to say. The fluorescence is very unusual. And if you find a point on the surface, and there's many, there's one there, and if you dig in, you will find a very, very bright point or focus of that same fluorescent material. And the final characteristic that this drywall had is that it has fibers, parallel fibers. And they're very straight, they're very fine, and these are features that I don't see in standard drywall. So I can't claim to know or confirm what these features are, but the key thing is that I have physical samples, and at some point, I'd like to get some authorities to take a look. Yes,
I've got a black light. I have a black filter that narrows it just to the band.
right,
And so you must have a quartz lens in there to be able to pick this up.
Right.
Which can see ultraviolet. But what I'm finding is your clothing, everything is getting these fluorescent fibers. If I had my black shirt and I lit it up with a light, I have all fibers through that. I guess it's in the drywall, it's in your suit. It's everywhere now. They're putting it in everything.
well, this is, so just to be clear, this is, I believe, absorbing the UV light and fluorescing a visible wavelength of light.
Right.
Right, okay. So,
Short wave or long wave?
this was, a, long wave, I
There
believe.
was long wave, but short wave may even show more.
Yeah.
I have a light that has both. I could bring it tomorrow.
Okay. All right, so I don't want to spend too much more time talking about that because that is a tentative, early stage allegation. If this pans out and proves to be something significant, by the way, I encountered this in the Coast Plaza Hotel and Suites where I collected samples as well. I believe it might be in widespread use. Why would it be in a hotel? Well, if a harassment network is big enough that they have some connections to a hotel, and the target thinks they can get away from it by checking into a hotel, they just assign the target to the harassment room, and the harassment continues. Okay, so who are the actors that are doing this kind of sadistic criminal behavior? Well, you hear a lot of TIs suspect that there's some elements of government running this, a government program of some kind where the motive would be human experimentation perhaps on energy weapons, or perhaps some form of experimentation on a social control program. Now, those ideas need to be looked at seriously, but it's hard. There's really no evidence now for or against that, but we know that the government has a history of doing that kind of experimentation. We don't put it past. When I say the government, what I think I'm really meaning is covert pockets within the government, not the wider government, because there's a lot of good people working in government. So I'll just say that possibility needs to be looked at, but I remain neutral on that possibility, personally. Another possibility is that the organized crime groups, this is a new form of organized crime. Imagine any kind of organized crime where you need muscle to do intimidation and coercion. Well, directed energy weapons and organized stalking are the perfect muscle because in the climate that we live in today, the perpetrators, there's almost no chance of getting caught for doing this to people. Okay, they have an open pass, and that's why would organized crime not co-opt these techniques? And the other possibility, or the other possible contributing thing would be, let me back up. For organized crime, by the way, there are any number of ways that they could be making money off of these activities. Any racketeering activities that need muscle, like drug dealing, like
Property.
influencing property deals, running people off of property. Anyone else? I mean, there's
trafficking, any kind of asset trafficking.
exactly the directed energy weapons are the perfect muscle. So even if this is just in our imagination, which it's not, this activity is guaranteed to grow unless it's counteracted. Yes.
If you're suspected of terrorism, somebody's making a complaint along with a written statement. Isn't it the government's job and a police force's job to investigate these accusations?
Yeah, that's part 4 of the talk.
Suspect of terrorism.
Yeah.
Like a terrorism man, not
Yeah.
like a burglary or a beating or terrorism.
The police are not helping us, and that's part 4 of the talk. If I don't have time to get to it, I encourage you to watch the talk that I post, because I cover those are important issues. I cover them at the end of the talk. Okay, so I think we can all relate to the outward street-facing level of gang stalking The behavior of these people seems cult-like. And so here I put the terror cults of abuse and dominance could be contributing to this. Now, in reality, what I think all three elements have made some contributions to this problem. And at this point, given the time, I'm going to skip forward to the BioEffects section of the talk. Okay, so what are the often reported bioeffects? This list is not comprehensive, and this is, by the way, we are, Kate Ryan is here, and we are delighted and anxiously awaiting the results of the survey, which are going to take a long time to compile. And this is a qualitative assessment on my part based on what I've heard, and it's not meant to be anything quantitative, which we will get from the survey. So this is just based on what I've heard on conference calls. I put together my list of often reported bioeffects. You have stabbing jolts of pain. People document unusual burns and lesions, electrified sensations, intense headache, automatic or involuntary muscle contractions, body movements, cardiac effects, heart racing, heart slowing, arrhythmia. I felt like I was going to die from a heart attack a number of times. Impaired breathing, paralysis, and I'm saying these in a very objective, calm way, but I mean these are horrifying effects. When I say paralysis, I'm talking true paralysis. I don't have it on the list, but many of these effects can have a secondary effect on sleep and cause sleep deprivation. Inexplicable mood swings, fear, anxiety, impaired thinking, intense nausea that starts and stops with immediate onset and offset. Some people report bowel distress, incontinence, and it's not a chronic problem that they experience. It's something that is precisely timed to the palpable energy that is entering their body. Okay, now these effects are what I would call the non-exotic effects of electronic harassment. But then we have the more exotic effects that are reported, like auditory effects, clicks, buzzing, chirping, very much like what the victims in Cuba, the diplomats and their families reported. High-pitched ringing, and some of these can be at an incapacitatingly loud level sometimes. They're not necessarily soft perceived sounds, and they can include, for many people, voices.
I was just curious, the ticking, is that something I'm hearing? Or is that, you know what I mean, is that something that's not real, or is it?
Well, hopefully there's time, and I'll get to that, and I'll explain how V2K works, and it is real.
Okay, because it comes from electronic equipment for me.
Yeah, but it's you are really hearing it, but the sound is being reproduced inside your head mechanically.
Oh, okay.
So that is not fiction. That is really happening. But it's
So it's not the television or the.
Well, I can't know. I don't know all the circumstances. Okay. I would have to be delivered into your house in a box in secret and investigate. I mean, there's no way for me to know from what you say. Right? But I mean, it's possible that it's a microwave generated effect. Okay, and then there's visual perceptual effects that many TIs report, like holograms, ghostly images that don't belong there, with no apparent origin, in the privacy of their own home, even with their eyes closed, they can see these images. I've experienced it. Who has experienced similar visual effects? They're common. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not the only one. These were the ones that came the closest to making me think something was going on with my perceptions. but I never let myself cross that line. I always knew that this was being done from outside sources. And then thought extraction. These are commonly claimed or experienced effects where people think that their mind is being read or someone is looking through their eyes. Anything that involves taking high-resolution thought data out of the brain, I'm going to lump under thought extraction. Okay? Now these I would call the exotic effects, the exotic claimed effects of electronic harassment.
Is that possible? I mean, because I've read a lot of stuff online saying that, you know, they can see through our eyes, they can read our thoughts. I mean, is that possible?
Well, I think I'll barely get to that's where I'll end my talk, and I'll give the scientist's perspective on that, okay? And, but let me tell you that if you survey the biomedical literature, there's actually a lot of literature on bioeffects of radio frequency energy. Many of these bioeffects are non-thermal. The FCC really only emphasizes the thermal effects, but there is a massive literature on non-thermal effects, which mostly involves modulated signals or pulsed signals. You can make a good case based on scientific literature that all of these non-exotic effects are possible from pulsed radio frequency energy. I can't take any more questions because we're running out of time, but we can talk after. Is that okay? Yeah. And I would say that if a victim of these assaults and intrusions is experiencing suites of these effects, I think this will be an argument used in court at some point, that when you experience syndromes or suites of these effects that start and stop in a coordinated manner, that makes a strong argument for this being intrusions that are pulse radio frequency energy. It's hard to explain that suite of symptoms being explained by coming and going with immediate onset and offset by other sources. Okay, now this is important. I especially want the non-victims who are here to be able to see this. These are some of the best documented electronic harassment injuries. On that previous list, you can get injured by high power radio frequency energy, especially if it is causing thermal effects, burning you, basically. I'll start with myself. These are, of course, I have pictures of myself. I took hundreds of pictures. I had hundreds of injuries, probably over 1,000 injuries of this kind in a 6-week period in Vancouver. These are all due to brief pulse intrusions into my apartment, which I perceived based on the trajectory of pain and the sounds I was hearing at the same time, stomping, and even frequency modulation sweeps from capacitors being charged, sounds like that, coming from the apartment directly above mine, through the concrete slab. This is a pulse of energy, I think microwave energy. That's what my ear normally looks like. A pulse lasting less than a second, and that's how my ear looked for an entire day. And it was very painful. And that energy doesn't stop at your ear, it goes into your brain, it goes into your head. It penetrates deep into your head. Here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different patches of like sunburned skin. Each of those was a delivery of energy, like feeling like a very thick rubber band was snapping me, not just on my skin, but deep into my neck and cervical region, and feeling like a first-degree burn for the rest of the day on my neck. You can even see here where a square of the outer layer of skin has been burned away. That feature is not on my body. That square was caused by an energy assault to my body. We have 5 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a welt. Redness is not always produced. Here's a swollen welt right above my eye from another pulse. I lost a third of my eyebrow in that assault. And this right here, this line, that's not a scar that I had from, I don't even have that on my head anymore. And here I'm hiding in the Vancouver Public Library. The only safe place I could find to make these photographs. Sometimes you get these bruises. Again, these are from snap-like pulses. You can get bruises that look like figurines, where the capillaries have been damaged in a weird splash-like pattern. Kate Ryan, and I like this term. This is getting tattooed by the perpetrators. And you can find documentation, credible documentation of horrific injuries. This is Patrick in North Carolina with a second-degree burn. Sorry, yes, that's a second-degree burn on his collarbone. Melissa in Oklahoma. You can even see what looks like, when you look online, the photos will be better. This is a rounded, like the edge of what looks like a cylindrical or circular beam cross-section. And this is James in Oregon. But what do we see here? We see coverage of this crime all over the country. It's happening it's happening all over the world, actually. And this is one of the participants who's at this conference. And I mean, these are atrocities. This is no joke. These are atrocities. And back to your question about why the government is not doing anything with these kinds of assaults and these kinds of crimes, they should be forced to do something to stop this. Of all the injuries I've ever seen, this one is the most suggestive of military tech, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Because it looks like the eyes were targeted precisely and at the same time. And that is not something someone could do with a handheld device. That would take extremely sophisticated target tracking and locking. Now, that gives you a flavor for my talk, and I will post the rest online, but I don't want to hold the conference up. And I encourage you to look at my video. It's aimed at as an informational video for the non-victim. It's really not for you guys, but I hope it's something that you might be able to share if you want to introduce someone to this topic. Again, welcome to the conference, and thank you for your time.
If you want to take any questions?
I'll take some questions. She has a question. I'll start with that. Okay. The question was, where am I going to post this? Well, I've already started. If you type, after this conference, if you type 2017 TI conference, you will find playlists of all the videos. So that's how, and those are also on my channels, but they're going to be posted widely. So another way to find these videos is to search Dr. Matthew Aaron. But if you search 2017 targeted individual conference, you'll find all these videos. Yes?
We don't have a place. We've been from Hawaii, California, all over the United States. We stay in hotels. So what is the way, because obviously they know that we're TIs and we're going to a hotel. So we tried to change it to upgrading to rooms. I mean, what can we do to protect ourselves in these rooms? Because I mean, we can feel it. It's sort of like 9, 10 classes around.
Okay, the question was, many TIs are forced to go on the run. I can relate to that, and they are forced to stay in hotels. And it may sound very conspiratorial that you can be a victim in hotels, but I tell you this is a common allegation, people being electronically harassed in hotels. I would suggest as one first approach is to get yourself a light like this. The first thing you do when you go into the hotel, make it completely dark and look for patterns of orange copper fluorescence. I mean, that's just one thing you can do. If you find any of that, return immediately to the front desk, and you can ask for a separate room, because probably the hotel doesn't wire every room like that. They have the spider web room, waiting for the TI, if that makes any
What
sense.
kind of light is that?
This is a PET urine detecting black light. It's only $10.
Okay.
Okay, so you can do that, or you can return to the front desk and say that you want your money back. But so you can be proactive like that. Probably a hotel has only one or a few rooms of that kind. So if you switch rooms, you might be okay. But
We've learned that Wyndham and Hilton are two of the big ones that work. Wyndham?
which ones? Say that again.
Wyndham?
Wyndham?
Hilton? Well, Wyndham and Hilton, they work with them. We've had major problems with them. So, I mean, when we make a reservation, we'll usually request for an upgrade. So, but, I mean, how do we know, you know, I mean.
Yes, I mean, it's tricky. You have to you have to be resourceful. But I want to make one follow-up comment to what you said, and that is the covert aspect of this crime is what's giving the criminals all the advantage right now. And once this becomes publicly known, this kind of activity, imagine what the public can do to fight back. We will have appraisal boards evaluating those hotels. Those hotels will not want people to say, I was tortured in that hotel, okay? And so exposure, once we get exposure, we can break this down and knock this out quickly through that kind of response. And I'll take one more.
There's a couple more questions that are coming down here.
Okay. We have a question in the front right here first.
Yeah, just what does the fluorescence indicate? What does the fluorescence indicate?
I can't say I know that right now.
Okay.
My model is that, and it's just a model, I want to be clear, I'm not claiming something that I can know for certain, but based on the construction sounds that I heard and whatnot, I think that drywall was installed in my apartment, being right across the alley from this major harassment network at 1190 Hornby Street in Vancouver. That was there, and I believe that it acts as a transmission medium. Now we know that microwave energy can go through solid objects, but if you have waveguides in an object, you can steer the microwave energy. And so I believe that they were supplying the energy somehow to the drywall, and then as it travels through, probably maybe using those parallel fibers that I mentioned.
So as a conduit.
As a conduit, and then when it hits that fluorescence, this is all just a model, when it hits that fluorescence, those act as like reflectors, and it's scattering the energy into the occupied space. And during that process, it's a consumptive process, and some of that fluorescent material sort of gets vaporized maybe and redistributed in a spray-like pattern. So the rings are basically what a result of prolonged usage. That's my model. Now, I'm not the first person to see that orange fluorescent stuff, and when you collect evidence in this way, you have to be careful in how you collect the evidence, but I hope more people will do so.
Well, I'm here for V2K and thought.
I didn't get to B2K. I have a...
Well, you did a little.
No, I have an entire section on that in my talk. So please look at the talk when it's posted online. I will give you the scientist view of B2K. B2K, by the way, is the...
And thought extraction.
Yes, I'll give you that. But remember, now don't take offense. I'm giving you the scientist view of those things. B2K is one of the best supported and best documented and best understood effects of microwaves, actually. And yes, there is documented literature that voices can be transmitted to people with microwaves. And I don't know why people can't get on board with that. It's very well documented. I'm going to take just one more question over
Thank
there.
you.
You're welcome.
Just a comment. I'd be surprised if there are very many rooms in a hotel you can get where you couldn't get targeted. Because they just move their vans around, and it all depends on, what cars are in what places. That's at least my opinion. And also, every hotel I've been in, they follow me to school with my little boy. They follow me anywhere. It's really staggering how many people are involved with it. And so what I think we should always do, any commercial enterprise, if you get gang stalked there, you go tell the manager you've been gang stalked, and you go on their website and you write all about what the gang stalking was that happened.
I think that's a great idea. There's a new activism idea. That's great. We need to do that, and they might take the reviews down, but at least it will get the word out that people are complaining about this activity.
And then other passengers or whatever will look at it and say, oh, what's gang stalking? And then they'll go and be educated. So
I think there's time for one more question. Did you have a question?
Well, following up, I get gang store, and the New York City police are all over that. They're asking why the police don't help, because they're part of the convert operation.
Right, that is part of my talk too, the full version of my talk. Emergency services, police, are the allegations from TIs. Probably the majority of TIs have experienced what they believe to be harassment from police that is timed to their overall program of harassment. I have never been harassed by police in my life outside of the 3 harassment episodes that I had in Vancouver within 3 days of the most intense targeting that I had. Now, is that a coincidence?
No.
San Jose.
Yes, this has to be the last question.
I have like 20 points that I wrote for myself as you were talking. The only one that I would like to emphasize is you did not speak about food poisoning.
Okay.
They have
Right.
that to me.
Right. Okay, the actual poisoning. So the reason I didn't talk about that is to limit the scope of my talk intentionally, and because I can speak on the radio frequency, and I don't mean to rule things out, but poisoning is a common. You can potentially catch them in the act. I hope you're at least keeping an eye out for that, because with poisoning you can potentially catch them in the act. But yes, these harassment networks seem to use every technique available to persecute and harm people.
Are we near the end?
We're done. Thank you very much.
If I can say this, I'll bring a little tomorrow. It's just a black filter. I'll prove that a lot of that orange is our bacteria. So we just don't want to get lost, and it could be more than one orange, but I will show that.
Okay, thank you. So we're doing Magnus's now, or?
Now we're going to do Dr. Henning Litter,
Okay.
scalar waves, the legal experiment.
Is this all?
Not yet.